Hello, we are now live. Welcome to Live with Marcel and Kilani. It is another great day here in Singapore, and how are things in Mississauga and Toronto, Kilani?
Things are good over here. It's starting to turn to winter weather finally. So we're getting the cold. It's been a little gloomy lately. So, but not too much snow yet. So hoping for a white Christmas coming up. But things are good over here.
I know. I'm looking for that too. We get it's less than 2 weeks. I get to come over and spend some time over there with you. Hopefully, we can get some snowboarding in.
Yeah, hopefully. We just heard that the opening day has been delayed because of the lack of snow. So hopefully snow comes
Uh,
soon. I never thought I would say I hope snow comes soon, but I hope the snow comes soon and we get a little bit colder weather over here.
I know. Yeah, it's just you have to wait for nature, right? Just it just
Exactly.
works that way. Yeah, exactly.
No
So
expectations
yeah,
as this
yeah,
as the title of the show kind of relates.
exactly. So so talking about the title for today, today is really around expectations. And of course we all have expectations, and in this case we're expecting to have some good weather to go snowboarding. And expectations show up everywhere, but they also show up in leadership. And what we find, with coaching very often, is that many of the conversations that we have with our clients is really around the ability to articulate expectations, but also the ability to manage expectations. And so we thought, today might be a really fitting day to have a conversation around, why is it so important to highlight expectations, right? And to maybe bring this a little bit more to our consciousness of how expectations can help us, but also how sometimes expectations can also derail us a little bit in terms of getting what we want. And then, of course, maybe having some practical tips to say, hey, what can you do to strengthen how you're actually setting those expectations and communicating them.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is such an important topic for anyone in any kind of leadership role, whether that's in the workplace or in regular life. Expectations is we see, and I think all of us have this experience, we see so much miscommunication in our worlds of where we expect one thing from someone, but yet without communicating it, so nothing ever gets done. And then there's just this constant what's going on, what am I supposed to do, what's expected of me. And so when we actually take a step back and focus on the communication, the setting clear, and clear is the key word, expectations, that's when we're able to actually get things done and move along in a much easier pace.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just miscommunications, but often no communications, right? And assumptions too, right? That are often made, that people have a thought that, their expectation is the same as everybody else's, right? And why would that need to be communicated or broken down? And that's what, often creates these type of challenges. And something, of course, a philosophy that we have at Level 5 Partners is that, in order for an organization to be able to function at what we call all five levels of the organization, from being an individual contributor, kind of entry level into an organization, to a team leader, to a manager, to a director, managing director, and then of course C suites, right? Is that ability to have very high quality interactions. And of course, it's something that we call, the interaction quotient. And what we find is that organizations that invest in the interaction quotient of their organization, they tend to do better. They tend to be more agile. They tend to be more adaptable. They tend to be more innovative and creative and all of these kind of things than organizations that don't spend that time and that investment and that energy on making sure that they have an organization with that high interaction quotient, right? And just to, if this is new to you, if you haven't had a conversation with us before, if this is new to you, the interaction quotient really it's a mathematical formula, and it's the same across every organization. It doesn't matter how big or small your company is. The profit of your company is going to be directly connected with the quality of the interactions that you have in the shortest amount of time. And so, if you can have more high quality interactions in the shortest amount of time, you're going to be more productive. And then that productivity translates immediately into profit, right? So for an organization, if you're not paying attention to the interaction quotient of your organization, chances are you have a blind spot. And so that's the work that we tend to do with, as we in our research and the work that we've been doing over the years, is identifying, how can we actually raise that interaction quotient, of everybody within the organization, not just at senior leadership level, but really making sure that from ground level all the way up to C suites, that everybody is having high quality interactions, right? And so if you think about it, right, an organization, if you look at an organization, really isn't anything more than a collective of people, right? If you take the people away from an organization, all you have is a bunch of bricks, right? A brick building, if you're lucky, and maybe a signed piece of paper. But other than that, it's the people that make up your organization. And if those people aren't aligned, and they're not working together in a way that produces that high interaction quotient, then there's room for improvement, and you'll find that a lot of your investment leaks, right? So a great example, for example, is that a lot of companies right now are laying off people because they're trying to kind of minimize their losses, right? And so because for a company, the balance between profit and loss is really important. And so when they see their profits starting to decline, the first thing they start thinking about is, we need to lay off people, because that's the highest cost that they deal with. And that can be a good strategy. The downside about it, though, is that when an organization lays off people without actually looking at the quality of the interactions that remains, right, once these people are gone, right, how is that affecting that interaction quotient? And if you're laying off people simply just to drive down cost, because that's your immediate knee-jerk reaction, but the quality of the interactions therefore drops too, then you're not solving the problem. It might look good on paper, but you're not solving the problem on the long term. On the other hand, if you can ensure that your organization has high quality interactions, and that they're really kind of performing the best way, even if you let people go, and you can keep investing in those high quality interactions, you're going to be able to maximize the performance of the organization. So it's a very important balance, and it's something that very very few organizations really spend enough time and energy on to quantify, right? So, because how do you quantify interaction quotient? And the way you do that is because time is a great factor to look at high quality interactions. And so if a lot of time is being wasted on miscommunications, on emailing back and forth. You said this, you said that, and it's your fault. We should, all of that kind of stuff. All of that is just wasted money, right? And there's some really interesting research that came out, that was done by, God, who did that research again? And it'll pop up in my head in a minute. Uh, what was their name? Okay, it doesn't matter. So in this research, what they discovered is that the average employee wastes around a day per week, a full work day per week, overcoming miscommunications. And what that means is that in your organization, and this was a large study, and in this organization, your employee, you're paying your employees to work for 5 days per week, but they're actually really only being productive 4 days a week. So you're losing 20% of productivity in your organization simply because your employees are very often confused about the message that the managers are delivering and the deadlines, and because we make so many assumptions, and in those assumptions we think we're being clear, but hardly anybody really knows that what you're talking about, and they need to figure these things out, and that costs organizations money. And that is how you measure your interaction quotient. If that wasted time becomes less, right, you could honestly give your employees a 4-day work week, and they would probably be still more productive than if you made them work 5 days a week. Imagine how happy your organization would be if they only needed to work 4 days a week, and you'd be making more money, right? So the interaction quotient here is the missing piece, and if you're not paying attention to that, you need to start paying attention to it.
Yeah, I think the interaction quotient is such a great tool and resource to use. And I'm curious for any of our listeners, what are a couple of examples of really high quality interactions? Oh, do you still have my sound?
Yeah, you're still in. I just wait, comments. Wait, we have a comment. All right, it's from Boris. Boris, my old friend. He says you have two choices in life when engaging with others, right? Do we lead by setting clear expectations or creating agreements? I like that. Yeah, exactly. And Boris, you've read Chalmers Brothers' book Language and the Pursuit of Happiness. So yeah, so you absolutely know that very often it is about the agreement, and that's what we're going to kind of get into today as well. Is that if there is no clear agreement, then there also can't be a clear expectation. Right. Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that, Boris.
Yeah, thank you, Boris. That's a great point. And it's funny, the first thing I thought of when I read the setting clear expectations or creating agreements was, oh, language and the pursuit of happiness. And actually, something that I have a question to ask both you and any of our listeners too is, when it comes to that piece of setting clear expectations and creating agreements or promises, or basically having the necessary conversations in order to create those agreements. When it comes to expectations, is there room to say no? Or is there room for discussion there? Or is it simply just a one-way street of one person setting, here is the line or the boundary, there it is, no conversation? Or is there
Oh,
kind of room
beautiful.
to move that line?
Wonderful. And this is something that a lot of managers struggle with, right? And I get that question a lot from managers, is like, how do I make people do stuff, right? How do I get people to perform better or be more productive, or as be more engaging, or whatever it is. How do I get people to do something that they might not want to do? And the answer isn't that clear, and the reason is because something I learned from nonviolent communication, which is a system set up by a great psychologist called Marshall Rosenberg, and Marshall Rosenberg, describes what he calls violence, right? But we can also call it aggression. And he describes aggression in a really, really great way that really applies here in this kind of case as well. Is that when you're demanding something from somebody, or if you're making a very strong assertion about something that you believe, and you do not want a conversation, right? You're not inviting a conversation. That's a form of aggression, right? So what that means is that if I try and make you do something that you don't want to do, but I don't want to have a conversation with you about it, at that moment in time, I'm applying aggression. Yeah, and from an interaction quotient perspective, right? Would being aggressive in that sense and not wanting to have a conversation, would that be considered high quality or low quality interactions?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
good point, and definitely low quality would be my answer to that question.
yeah.
And that's a great point, and I've done a lot of research on nonviolent communication, and I'm reading a book from someone who works with Marshall Rosenberg.
Okay.
Um,
Is
it's,
it Orange J. Sofer?
yes, it's "Say What You
Oh,
Mean"
oh,
by.
I love Orange J's. Yeah, I mean that is just such a powerful book, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely recommend it for anyone in any leadership role.
Yeah, we should
But
actually put that in the comment. Yeah, the book's called
okay,
"Say What You Mean" by Orange J. Sofer. One of my coaching bibles. Yeah,
yeah, and I'll put the link in the comment section there if anyone wants to get it right now and get right into reading it. It's a great book.
yeah.
But it is such a great point how they talk about when you almost force someone to do something or have the expectation that, oh, they're just going to do what I tell them to do. It is a form of violence. It's an
Mhm.
act of aggression, and
Yeah.
it's something that we don't think of, and it's not really something that we're taught when it comes to communication. But there really is this need, I think, especially now with the direction leadership is moving in, to open up the conversations in when it comes to anything really, but especially when it comes to something as sticky or as weird as expectations. And what that reminds me of too, bringing in Chalmers Brothers' book, which I can link in the comments as well in a second, is the idea of making promises or making requests, and the understanding that the second you take away a person's ability to say no, if you expect them to say yes to everything, it's no longer a conversation. It's no longer an agreement. And I think the
Mm.
same thing rings true when it comes to expectations in leadership, is that your employees need to feel comfortable pushing the boundaries on the expectations, on feeling okay to have the conversations and to question where it's coming from or if they feel that it's not okay. And I think that maybe a lot of the tension around expectations comes from the fact that we're not comfortable talking about them.
Yeah, yeah, and it's great that you mentioned that because something and it's a question I often ask my managers is that if you make a request and you're not willing to accept a no, is it then still a request? Right? Because it then becomes a demand. If I ask you for a favor, but you're not allowed to say no, then it's not a request anymore, right? It's literally a demand because the only thing that you want from them is a yes. And we see that in life a lot, right? We see that everywhere in life. Many people become upset with their friends and their family because, oh, I just asked him to do the simple thing and he said no. And if you're upset about them saying no, or if they, because what ends up happening then, right, is that because when you expect a yes, or you're only willing to, expect a yes, then of course when somebody says no, or what's even worse is you're so passionate about wanting to get a yes that they feel so pressured that they're going to say yes but really mean no. And what that ends up happening is either they don't keep their promise, right? Or they do half-assed work. And so the quality of the work will also drop just because they're trying to keep you happy. And that's one of the challenges of an expectation is if I have an expectation that you're only allowed to say yes to all of my requests, chances are that is not going to be a high quality interaction.
Yeah. And why do you think that we have that? Why is there this instinct for all of us to not be okay with a yes?
I'm I mean, I'm sure there are many different reasons, but generally speaking, I really honestly believe that as children, right, we are raised to basically see no as a bad word, right? We are raised to be compliant. We often see children, right? And what's really funny is a lot of little kids, one of the first words they learn to say is no. And when they say no, what do the parents do? Right? They override the no. It's
Mm.
like, go, hey, Johnny, it's time to go brush your teeth. No, Johnny, it's time to go brush your teeth. Right. And so you're now going to go brush your teeth. And so we're already teaching kids at a very, very young age that the word no is taboo. And the interesting thing about that is that, when we grow up, we still have this weird feeling of like, if I say no, right, it's going to be weird. It's going to be, that person's not going to be happy because that's what we're raised with, that yeses, right, make people happy. And unfortunately, it's true, right? Because if you're a manager and you're busy and you got a million things going on, and you ask, one of your staff members to do something for you, and they say no, you're going to go, wait, what? Right? I'm too busy for this. And so ultimately, we always want to hear a yes from a request, right? But at the same time, people really struggle to say no because it's not in their name. It's been beaten out of them basically by society. One of the things that I teach many leaders, and it's such a common conversation, you'd be really dumbfounded, is even in C suites, is learning how to say no. Like they struggle with how to say no. Like, there's like, well, okay, there's a maybe, and well, let's look at it next week. And it's like, but there's no, so it's no straight up, sorry, no. It's just kind of happen. Right. And that's the, and I think the second question that we then also tend to want to ask, which by the way is equally destructive, is why not? Right. So if I make a request of you and say, hey, I'm just gonna say something, hey, Kilani, can you mow the lawn? And you go, no. And I go, well, why not? Yeah, and so that then comes from a place of, hey, I do not want to accept your no. So I need to understand from you what no is, when in reality, no should just be good enough. You have every right to say no.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's okay. We'll figure something else out. Right. And I think that's one of the challenges, is we're so afraid of the word no, is that we expect that yes. And I see that expectation, right, all across the way, throughout the organization. And three pillars of communication that organizations are built on, right, are requests, promises, and expectations. If you look at every single interaction in an organization, it's very often it's one of those three things. It's either going to be around a request, it's either going to be around promises, or it's either going to be around expectations, right? So the requests of like asking people for assistance or help, or asking people to to take part in an organizational transformation. That's a request, right? Hey, we have a transformation coming up. I just had a company yesterday, right? I was talking to one of the senior leaders, and he was actually kind of up for a new role, and as he was, kind of, they were discussing this new role. 2 days later, there was like, sorry, we have this transformation coming up, and you're going to have to wait with this new role because the role is going to become obsolete. And so every single transformation that we want to think of is really a request, and it's a request of the people to say, hey, are you okay with this? Right? But God forbid if we're not okay with it. Right? And so organizationally, people then just got to go, well, okay then, right? And they go with the transformation, but there isn't a clear request in the sense of are you okay with this?
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting here too, and a good question to ask yourself as a leader whenever these weird or uncomfortable conversations come up, because it is a lot easier to just say, well, I might as well just tell them to do it, they're going to do it anyway, rather than opening up this avenue for conversation, which takes time, it takes energy. They're usually uncomfortable conversations to have. But the question to ask yourself there is, would you rather tell your employees, here, you're doing this, and then have them drag their feet and you're pulling a bunch of people's weight along with you? Or would you rather take a little bit of time, have the bit of conversations, maybe work through some conflict there, and then have a goal that everyone is working towards at their full capacity? And which of those situations do you feel you're going to move faster, and which one's probably going to feel better for you as the leader and as the organization
Oh,
as a whole?
yeah, wonderful. And it's kind of like it's again one of those misconceptions, right? That we need to do this in a very timely manner, and therefore, and I see this a lot, and I've coached many transformations over the years, and it always ends up being one of this that the senior leadership team decides that there needs to be this transformational shift. Some organizations, and even some really big, kind of, mind-blowing, big, they have a transformation at least every other year, right? And that is decided from kind of, the top down. And so that senior leadership team says, all right, we have a transformation. And then, actually having conversations throughout the organization, right? So having, setting up, or kind of scaling the conversation, really, right? But where you earn buy-in from your team that's below you, and then of course as that spreads out, they need to earn buy-in from their people, and their people need to earn buy-in from their people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But organizationally, taking that little bit of extra time to earn the buy-in from your organization, so that everybody is prepared, everybody's mentally prepared, that they know when this transformation is going to start, and they all and in advance what the objections are going to be, right? What are the promises going to be from the people in the organization, and how can we set expectations around that, so that we can actually overcome a lot of the challenges even before the transformation starts, right? Then when you hit the go button, everything just runs, right? And so what we do now is we do the opposite. We hit the go button first, and then we have to put out fires. And that amount of time of putting out fires takes years. It takes, like, is literally so much time needed to get everybody on board with this transformation. It slows things down considerably to a point where then of course all of these interaction quotients are dropping in the organization, and it's therefore reducing effectiveness. So in a way, we think it'll be more timely for us, and it'll be quicker for us if we just kind of pull the plug and we just say we're going to do it, and then we'll figure everything else out. But in reality, of course, to be more strategic and to be more proactive in that request, managing the promises, setting clear expectations, and being able to have a conversation around that is way faster. It just takes more work initially. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really like that you said earn the buy-in, using the word
Mhm.
earn. And I think that really hits on the idea that leadership is a sales role more than it is anything else.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the reasons why a lot of CEOs are commercial people, right? Because they've been selling all their lives, and so for them it's very natural, right, to sell themselves, and selling ideas, and yeah, and for people who don't come from that kind of commercial space, for them, stepping into leadership roles, right, can sometimes feel a little uncomfortable because they have to learn to sell their vision, right? And if you don't get buy-in to your vision, you're not going to get alignment to your vision. And if you don't have alignment to your vision, you're not going to get execution to your vision. And if there's no execution, there's not going to be any favorable results. One of the reasons why I think it's like 70% of all transformations fail for that exact reason, right? Is because we're not taking that time to really work on that, right? So that's I guess the big takeaway from this, right? And by the way, that research on interactions, that was done by Grammarly. So Grammarly, they discovered that, and they interviewed, I think it was like tens of thousands of people, and came up with this groundbreaking realization that we waste, about 20% of our work time is wasted on just trying to figure out what people are saying, and miscommunications and all of that. That's a big chunk of time. So being more clear in how we are communicating is, of course, very, very important. So yeah, so I think where we can leave this, right, it's if you are in any form of relationship, if you are in any form of leadership, if you are a manager, it really, or even if you're just married and have kids, right, is take note of the amount of expectations that are made in life. And a lot of these expectations are unspoken, right? We have expectations of people to behave a certain way, and then we end up being very surprised if they don't, right? And then when we see that behavior that doesn't fit our expectations, we judge them for it, and we have this kind of ability to judge people for our unspoken expectations. For example, it could be somebody who doesn't show good manners, or somebody who burps in public, or somebody who whatever that, or throws trash on the ground, or whatever that it is. We have expectations that we very often think that everybody else has in life too, but of course they don't, because they're unspoken expectations, and everybody's brain works differently, and so therefore they operate in a very different space. And so if you are in a unit of people who work together, make sure that you minimize the number of unspoken expectations that you might have. You might expect your people to do a certain quality of work, but if you're not willing to lay out, right, what that quality looks like, what that standard of satisfaction needs to be, then you're going to leave it up to people's assumptions to try and figure out how to meet your expectations. And that always leads to stress and anxiety, and at the end of the day, the higher your expectations are, the more you're going to live in disappointment, right? Because unspoken expectations only lead to disappointment, and that's not a very productive place to be.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, not having those conversations doesn't only affect your employees' work or your family's work, but yours as well. Is that even though those conversations may seem uncomfortable at first, they actually end up saving you so much time and energy in the future. Like you mentioned, Dad, not having to put out fires constantly along the way to just ensure, okay, everything is fireproof, we're ready to go, everyone's moving in the same direction. You're going to move a lot quicker and with a lot less resistance as well. And one last thing that I want to touch on is I really like the idea that a company is the people, because without the people, what is the company? It's just four walls and a roof, right? It's just the building. And to take that even a step further, and this is something I learned from the Newfield Network, is that an organization is nothing but the conversations that exist within it. That the only thing that keeps an organization is the fact that we talk, that we know who's who has what roles, who's supposed to be doing what. And the way to make organizations run more smoothly is to make the clarity of our communication, or to make our communication a lot clearer, is kind of the key to all of that. So that's kind of the last thing that I wanted to touch on with that. But just to remember, the clearer your conversations, the smoother things are going to run.
Yeah, absolutely. And a great way to break that down, right, is using that kind of the three pillars of requests, promises, and expectations. And so if you feel that you have an expectation, or if you have something that you want somebody to do, remember that you have the right to make a request. And by the way, your people have the right to make a request of you too, right? Because that's a two-way street. But that you can make a request to your people, and also understand that they have the right to say no. And I think that should be a very clear communication. Because if a person feels that they have the right to say no, it also means that they also feel psychologically safe. And that's an important measure of the psychological safety of your team. If they don't feel like they have the right to say no, they already don't feel safe. There is already a degradation of trust in your team, because they don't trust that you're going to accept that no, right? So if you encourage your people that it's okay to say no, right? But when they say no, to come with an alternative, right? Say, no, I can't do that now, but how about next week? Or, hey, what about Frank over there, right? Is it okay if I ask Frank to help or whatever? But there's always an opportunity to have a conversation around your request, right? That it shouldn't just be a yes or no. Sometimes it's also a let's look at it differently answer, right? And so allow for that process to happen, right? And that's when people get to make very clear promises. They can make a promise around their yes, and they can make a promise around their no, and they can make a promise around their maybe, right? And here's where the expectation then comes in. When a person makes a promise to say yes, then you can say, these are my expectations, right? If you do this job, what I expect from you is that there's I'm just going to say something. There's an 80% accuracy in grammar. I'm just saying something, right? And so be clear in your expectations. To say, if you hit that, I'm going to be really happy. Yeah, so they know what they're working towards to be able to be able to live up to that promise that they're making to you. That is a very important piece of that expectation, right? So rather than saying, "Listen, I need you to get this report ready for me by tomorrow," right? Say what your expectation is about the quality of that report, right? And how big does it need to be, and kind of all of those kind of things. Share that with them so that they know that they don't need to overwork. I will tell you that the amount of time wasted by employees who over deliver on their promises because they're afraid that you're not going to be happy with their work. They waste so many hours of time in a day, right? Trying to make it extra perfect so you're going to be happy. That is time wasted if it doesn't have to be that perfect, right? So be very, very clear in that so that they can measure that promise to what you're expecting. Another great example, I always use the example of mowing the lawn, right? Is if I ask you to mow the lawn and you say yes, that's a promise. But then I say, well, I also have an expectation that's going to be done before tomorrow. If I don't, even though I might be thinking that I want it done by tomorrow, but if I don't tell you that expectation and you do it next week, I'm still going to be disappointed because you haven't done it by tomorrow. You didn't do it right away, right? And so be very, very clear in that articulation of what those expectations are. So it is a request, it's a promise, and it's an expectation. Be clear in all three of those, and I guarantee you that the quality of your interactions is going to grow tremendously. You'll see a reduction in the amount of wasted time and miscommunications, and therefore an increase in productivity in your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are such great points. And with the, again, the center of that being have the conversations, right? That's the big thing to hit home. Have the conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's pretty much it for me today.
Yeah, me too. In that case, I'll just go ahead and start to close up. And to all of our listeners, as always, thank you for taking the time out of your Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, depending where you are in the world, to join us live this week. As we close up here, I'd love to hear your biggest takeaway from our conversation today. So if you can sum that up into one word, put that in the chat and let us know what the one word that you're taking with you from our conversation is today. And we would love to continue this conversation with you at Level 5 Partners. We specialize in offering solutions to companies by helping their employees work better together, ultimately. We provide tailored solutions to increase productivity and efficiency by partnering with some of the most elite global coaches, facilitators, and providers. So if you'd like to continue the conversation with us as well to see how we could potentially be a good fit to work together, go ahead and click that link in the comments. I'll put it in there now. We only have a couple of slots left for the year. We're booking up quick. So make sure to make a booking ASAP if you're interested in chatting with us. Otherwise, we can chat in the new year. Or if that link is not coming through for you, because I was having trouble getting it on LinkedIn, you can just email me at Kilani, Kilani, my name's there, at levelvpartners.com, and we can get a call set up there as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and or you can also just comment in the comment box, maybe say, "Hey, I'd love to chat," and then we'll also reach out because we get the notifications of the chats and stuff like that as well. And also, we're also on YouTube, right? So think of our YouTube channel. This the video is always available. You can go back to it. You can share it. Subscribe to it when you have that moment, and that makes a big difference as well. Sign up for our newsletter. We have a LinkedIn newsletter called Next Generation Leadership. Also very, a lot of insights, a lot of great stuff that comes in from the research that we're doing, and the experiences that we have as coaches. So, feel free to stay in touch, and we will see you in the next broadcast. Oh, next broadcast, we have a special guest coming. So as of January, we're going to start working with, actually starts next session. But in the new year, we're actually going to start inviting guests to come on the show who have something really interesting to bring, who are in that kind of leadership space, and sharing some insights with you as well. So if you are a leader, or if you are in the learning and development and HR space or management space, and you feel that you do a lot of work in, making sure you're raising that interaction quotient in your people, and you feel that you're, that what you're doing is worth, sharing, feel free to let us know that as well. We're going to be lining up a list of guests over the next year, and would love to include you as well, as if you have something to bring that other people might not be working on yet. And that's it for me. And Kilani, did you have anything else to add?
No, that's it for me as well.
Perfect. All right. Well, then in that case, everybody have a wonderful rest of the week, and we will see you in our session next week. See you, everybody.